Right, well, big welcome everybody that's on so far. We're hopefully going to be joined by some more people. There are scheduled to be just shy of 30 joining us today from all around the globe. So welcome to everybody that's joined us so far for this third of our community huddles. Today as billed, we have Brian Underhill taking our session. Just a few housekeeping points which I may need to remind people of as we go through the people joining us. But please keep your mics on mute for the duration of the conversation. Brian's happy to take questions throughout. Just simply post them on the message board, which I'm going to be monitoring for Brian. And once I've brought them to his attention, please take your mic off mute if that's a convenient time for him and ask your questions of him. So I'll just pass you over to Tim now, who's going to do a few words of introduction. So all over to mute. Thanks.
Thank you, Lawrence. Really great to see everyone here. As I always said, I love these community huddles in the fact that we get the chance to see lots of faces from this. I'm really pleased to have Brian with us here. It was only last year, I think, that I did the same thing for his group of coaches. When I came on to discuss our coaching culture tool in BARC, the coaching culture assessment tool, which is the way Brian and I came together, actually. We met, I think it was in Istanbul, was it not, Brian? He's nodding, yes. At the EMCC conference where I was presenting. And since then, we share ideas, and when we're both in the same part of the world, try to meet up. But I've always been fascinated to talk to Brian about his experience. Those of you that know Brian will know he's written the Executive Coaching for Results book, which is well recognized in the industry and well read. He also has direct experience of working with Marshall Goldsmith, which really impressed me the first time we met Brian, and working with him on his coaching company, but now runs his own company called Coach Source. Which has around 300 coaches around the world, I think, and certainly operates with some very interesting clients and some very interesting programs. We did try to put a proposal in together once, didn't we? Was it eBay?
Yeah. It was eBay, yeah.
Yeah, which was around developing their coaching culture. We put together what we thought was a very powerful proposition that, like all these things, tenders either come and go, and this one didn't go our way. That you never know, that might well come about again. So this is a really good opportunity for you guys to meet Brian. My understanding is he's billed as the MD of the world's largest coaching organization. I'm not sure whether that's actually true or not, but he's certainly a sizable operation, and he's certainly got a lot of experience about globally about how coaches operate in the private sector space, which is what interests me as well. Is coaching is fine on an academic level, but you know, actually when the rubber hits the road and we get out there into organizations, that's when it gets most interesting, because it's you know, coaching doesn't exist really if it's not being delivered. And so, you know, Brian and I often have some very interesting discussions about that as well. So Brian, you're going to come and talk to us about how corporations source and screen executive coaches, a very topical subject for us. And I'm sure we'll all be interested to listen to what you've got to say. As Lawrence said, Brian's open to taking questions. Pop them in the chat for us if you want to ask a question, and then Lawrence can do the sort of butting in, if you like, and then if that's all right, Brian, Lawrence might suddenly butt in at some point and say, I've got some questions, and then we'll take it from there. So Brian, over to you. Thank you.
Great. And I may actually ask questions where I ask everyone to put something in the chat, and that'll come up shortly. So be ready for those two, where you just give some sort of quick response to me by chat, or we can unmute as well. Thanks, Tim, and greetings, everybody. Greetings from, I'm in Silicon Valley, Northern California today. I was just in London a few days ago, just as your weather started to get pretty nice. But excited to spend this hour with you. To get started, I am actually going to take us back in the earlier days of the coaching industry to 2004. So what are we, 15 years ago or so? And at that time, I was working for Marshall Goldsmith, running his coaching activities, his coaching operation. And we had a pretty good network of coaches. We probably had around 500. I'll correct Tim's numbers in just a little bit. So we actually had around 500 coaches at that point. And the largest tender, RFP, of the entire industry to date was coming out from one of the industry darlings, one of the companies everybody loved and respected. It's sort of, you know, the Apple or the Amazon or one of those companies everyone talked about. But in 2004, the company that everybody talked about was Dell Computer Corporation. They were fascinating people with their business model, growing like crazy. Michael Dell was a big investor in leadership development, and they got big into coaching. And they said they were going to hire one coaching firm to coach 200 of their executives every year for the next 3 years around the world. And they were looking for that one firm to do this job. We felt like we had a pretty good shot, but you know, whoever won this was easily going to have the biggest contract that I think the industry had seen at that point. So the challenge for us was, yes, we had this network, but Dell gave us the list of where all of their facilities were located, all their executives were located, and we did not have a very good match necessarily between places they had executives and where we had coaches. And so we had to go on a massive hunt quickly to find more executive coaches in all kinds of faraway places in the world. I had to start posting, telling everyone we're looking for coaches. I had to post on, you know, write our coaches and write others I knew. And then I had to post on listservs, because we're talking 2004. We still had things like that. And ask people, if you're a coach and you're in such and so parts of the world and you meet these criteria, please complete our several page application. And then we need a separate bio. We need a photo, which wasn't that easy to get in that era. We need a few other things. Then we had to interview you and then decide if you would represent us and represent our brand to Dell, who was also going to interview you. This had to be done in a total of 2 weeks. 2 weeks, nonstop activity while we were beefing up our coaching pool. The good news is that we did win the business, and they're still a client of ours today. So that was spectacular. It really put us on the map in the coaching field. But the more interesting learning was that we figured out how to find coaches and then screen them incredibly quickly for purposes like this. Now, today we don't rush around quite as much because the network actually is even larger at 1,100 executive coaches in over 100 countries. And the vast majority of them are independent practitioners that run their own business, and you know, we just call upon them when we need. So we don't have that mad dash much any longer. But I have certainly gotten good at meeting coaches, screening coaches, and wherever I travel, I do meet with more of our coaches. I've probably met 600 or so in person, which we like to joke is a lot of Starbucks meetings. That adds up to lots of Starbucks is what that does. And my little trivia question for anyone who feels like it, if you know your way around the world and want to try and guess which Starbucks I'm sitting at anywhere in the world, you're welcome to do so and throw it in the chat panel. If we were together live, I would even give you a book for it, but that might be a little hard here. So I'll have a different Starbucks at the end of my talk as well, just to keep everybody energized and caffeinated. So today, I'm going to be talking about how corporations look for coaches. How do they find them? How do they source them? And then, of course, how do they screen them? And given our firm, we play a big role in doing this for our firm and on behalf of corporations. My hope is that those of you here today and those listening later might learn a few things. If you're an independent coach, that perhaps helps your practice, helps you present yourself more effectively, perhaps be more appealing to corporations when they're picking coaches. By the way, did we have any Starbucks guesses? Lawrence? And he's muted. so we'll see. You're muted, Lawrence.
Gareth had a guess.
What was that?
Gareth had a guess at Istanbul.
Hey, good job. Who's Gareth? That's very impressive. Yes, very good job. He's probably been there. This has got to be the most beautiful Starbucks. I know I digress here, but it's the most beautiful Starbucks in the world. It's right on the Bosphorus, right there between Europe and Asia, right on the water. And there's lots of places to sit where you can look out upon. And Tim, this is actually when I met you. I just realized this. It was the day before. I was preparing my slides for my presentation. The day before we all got together in Istanbul, and I got this great seat and I sat there for hours, even though it was actually rather cold, but I don't care. So good job, Gareth. All right, let's move on. So I actually want to find out, how do people find you today? So this will be one of those ones that everyone just type in the chat panel. And I can also see the chat panel too. So just quick word or two, how do people find you today as a coach? What's the most common way that people tend to find you? Referrals from Karina, other firms, word of mouth, LinkedIn, referrals, networks, very good. If I missed any, another referral as well. Mainly through referrals. Good. So we're hearing word of mouth referrals, a little bit of one LinkedIn there, networks. And if anyone has something that is not mentioned, some other way that people find you, group agent, networks, past client, LinkedIn. Good. Okay, so we're hearing some of the same thing, agents as well. No one ever says website. Every time I ask this question, I've only met one coach who ever says website is where he's gotten most of his business. Let me share with you what corporation said. And to do that, we're going to show you a research study that we've conducted. This research study, by the way, it was originally for sale. It's now available for free, and I could find a way to get it to you guys. It's also on our website, the Executive Coaching for Results Research. And so you're welcome to download that and enjoy it. But in our research, we actually spoke to 4 different groups about all kinds of topics in the coaching industry to get their opinion on things in our industry. And so the first group, of course, was companies, corporations mostly, that hire coaches that are not coaching agents, but corporations, big corporations. So we had about 97 of those answer our surveys. We then talked to internal coaches who generally work within their own company. We had over 100 of those. External coaches, we had lots of those since we do have a large network. We had a great size response rate. And the most interesting group, which I'll share with you a bit today as well, the most fun for me, was real live living executives seen in the wild and surveyed by us. We had nearly 100 of those answer our surveys. And we asked them basically, how do you find coaches? And there's a couple options they had at the time, which is one is a coach would just contact them and say, hey, I'm a coach, can I work with you? Another might be a coach who writes and speaks and publishes. Some coaches contact leaders at that company to generate business for themselves. There's the web and LinkedIn, or through agents, as some of you have mentioned, current vendors. You can briefly look at this and wonder what might have been the top choice from organizations. As I share with you, the top choice was by far and away through their current vendors. Now, these are the people who manage coaching at their company, at their respective company. And there's definitely been a trend in the last many years for organizations to simplify the number of vendors that they have. So rather than having 50 coaches all on different contracts, they might pick 2 or 3 or even 1, like Dell did, vendors who handle and manage all of the coaching activity that takes place. So you see a vast majority of companies that we had met, at least, are sourcing this way. Next up, about a little less than 50% is through referral and word of mouth. And you could kind of say, honestly, that both of these are some form referral and word of mouth in one sense, because if you're lined up with a vendor, with a coaching company, then they know you and they're the ones who are recommending you. And in this case, you're as an independent finding work similarly. And you can see the other choices I mentioned earlier are fairly minimal. Not that you ought not to try them or do them, but they're fairly low in how companies seem to find you. I was a little surprised by this at the very bottom: public speaking, writing, publishing, etc., because many of us spend a lot of time doing this, including like me right now. Tim does a lot of speaking, you know, but oh well. It's probably true when I really think over the years that I've been speaking and so forth. I'm not sure I can remember too many, major coaching contracts that sort of arose from there. But other coaches have had much better results than me, perhaps, in the speaking department. Now, if you want to compare what you just saw with what coaches think happened, so remember I had 657 coaches answer our surveys as well, and you can see different perceptions in what coaches experience. So you can see not as many coaches would have experienced this concept of being referred by current vendors. Here, it's actually the number 2 choice, not the number 1 choice. And then coaches will, of course, pick the number 1 choice is through referrals and word of mouth. And then these other choices are roughly a third of coaches in all cases would say that they've been able to be found or receive business through these other mechanisms. I mentioned search the web, for example. I don't know that a coach should spend a ton of money on a fancy website and whatnot, but they probably should have a website at this point, or at least a really great LinkedIn profile. And these days, when I'm meeting with a coach, even though we have all of their application material, I'll probably, we almost always Google them, and we'll go look. If we see a LinkedIn, we'll always look at that. And if we see a website, we'll definitely look at that. Interestingly enough, if I see a video on a website, I'll always watch that. And one trend, 2 of our major clients, one in Europe and one in New York, have both asked coaches in their cadre to create 1-minute videos introducing themselves. And I'm sort of curious if you're going to see more of that from clients who would like coaches to have an introductory video that is put somewhere so that the end client can watch some of these videos and pick a coach. I don't know if I agree with this as the best way to pick a coach. I bet we could have a spirited discussion about this, because not all coaches come off well on video. Trust me, I've seen some of these videos. People I know who are fantastic at coaching, they just aren't, video photogenic or whatever it is, and they don't come off so well. And you could get someone who's just perfected and polished, but maybe not even the greatest coach, that could come off with a great video. So that's one of the trends I've been noticing lately. So I could probably pause, Lawrence, because this is one of the bigger slides of the morning. I'll come back. I'll just come back here just for a quick second and see if there was any observations from those of you here. Any observations or even questions from what you're seeing here about how coaches are being found?
Yeah, we've got some observations saying guess that videos favor the most photogenic. Just trying to look out if there's any. Don't think there's anything else over and above the questions that you asked. No. Anybody with any additional questions that they wanted to ask at this point, or observations?
And it sounds like this might match their experience based on what they were saying in the chat earlier. But if anyone's had a different experience or success in some other way, it'd be great to hear about.
Something for Gareth, do you want to make your point?
Yeah, I was really taken with the first piece of data on preferred or approved vendors and the difference there with external coaches. And I just wonder if maybe that might point to kind of a lack of commercial savvy amongst some coaches, like they don't really know how to get onto a framework or engage with the commercial side of a business.
That would be true to my experience too, Gareth. And understandably, your typical coach might not necessarily have a lot of that sales wiring always. Some will, but not always. And they love the work, they love the coaching, but they don't necessarily love the whole sales process. And that's why I think vendors like us it's a good relationship, because we don't mind that process. That's what we're there to do, is try and sell and win business. And we can often take care of that for the coach, and then the coach just has to show up and do their job. But I think coaches should probably be aware of these types of companies and be closer connected with them. And when we were in London recently, we had a coach forum, and someone had said there, you need to remember one coach told the others that you should probably remember that CoachSource is also a client of yours. So not only do we have the end client that we're serving, but honestly, CoachSource should be treated as a client, because they're the ones who are getting you all the work. So if you're hard to work with, or they can't reach you, or things like that, then they're going to go use other coaches instead. So that might be something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah. Karina asks a question in terms of approved vendors. Do you want to expand on that, Karina?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was pretty much actually what Gareth just said. That was more or less the question that I was going to ask. But it was more, yeah, just to elaborate more on sort of what exactly organisations look for in an approved vendor. What's approved by other people that they trust, or how would they? Yeah, just what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're seeing this trend where organizations are slimming down the number of contracts with coaches they have, and instead increasing contracts with third-party coaching firms or vendors or whatnot. We're seeing these tenders all the time now, like the one in Dell. We've responded to 2 in Ireland just recently, for example, for this very same thing. So just single individual coaches might find it hard in some cases to get individual contracts, but the company finds it easier to then contract with 1 or 2 or 3 vendors to oversee all of it. Because it takes a lot of work, honestly, to run a coaching program within an organization. And so you have people inside the company wasting a lot of time managing coach contracts when they could be doing more important work, and just simply outsource that management to external parties generally. So.
Christina Gilmer asked the question, if I don't have a LinkedIn profile, would you not consider me?
In today's day and age, I don't know the last time I've looked for a coach that didn't have a LinkedIn. The LinkedIn is very common. It's pretty, it's free, and it summarizes everything you've been up to, has a picture. I mean, yes, of course we would consider someone, but I just don't know when the last time was that someone didn't have a LinkedIn profile. It's kind of de facto at this point. So I would certainly recommend, getting one. There's no reason not to at this point. All right. Well, let me move on. So, so a couple of my suggestions for anyone who's interested. I just said get connected to more coaching firms if you're looking to build your business here. Writing, speaking, I still think is a good thing, even though I have a question mark there. I think it's still always a great thing to put your name out there. Networking, not just with firms, but with other coaches. Other coaches send each other a lot of work, and I'm sure you've seen that. It happens all the time. Where a coach says, oh, I'm busy, I can't do this work, but you're great at this, can you do it? Great idea. I also tell coaches, have a real deep specialty in something, because it's so much easier for me to pitch your bio to a client when I can say, this is one of the world's experts in the area of such and so. And the way we know that is because they've written a book on it, they speak on it, their past experience supports it. And this is not as daunting as you think. There's so many little niche areas that you could be a pretty great expert in that very few other people could. When you think about your background and some of the work you've done, you know, if someone who's worked in sales, in pharmaceutical, who's female in Europe, is just an example, could specialize in women leaders in pharma, in the sales arena or something. I mean, that could actually become a niche that someone could focus on as a practice area. And so it's easy for us, and I'll show you in a moment the data that supports that when you have specialty areas that are well defined, clients align with that. And then here, if you really want to figure out how to get more work, move to Shanghai and learn Mandarin, because we need a lot of Mandarin speaking coaches in China. It also helps if you are originally Chinese, which I can't see that here on the photos of every one of you here with us today, but there's a lot of growth in the China market and not enough Chinese speaking coaches. All right, I want to move on to the next section. So we're going to now go to the part about how do coaches how do companies screen coaches. This is a lot of fun, this next section. So the company may have noticed you, and now they're going to try and figure out whether you're a good match for them. So before I do that, when I do my public presentations, I'm giving this presentation at the ICF Converge conference in Prague. If any of you are going, we could say hi. And when I do my public presentations, I always tell the group, hey, what happens when you Google executive coach and click image? And here's what happens. So brief diversion there. Let's move on. So what are some things an executive most wants when they are selecting a coach? So think about that for a little bit. So I'm twisting it a little bit. So we're not going to talk about what companies are looking for. We're actually talking about what executives themselves are looking for when they're when they are picking a coach. Because remember, we got some data from executives as well. So here's a few possibilities, and you could even try and guess. One of these is one of your top choices, and one of these is actually one of the lowest choices. So see if you can figure out building rapport, whether you have a certification in our field, what kind of business experience you have, and what do you cost as a coach. So feel free to think about that. Pick your top and pick your bottom. And then I will show you the data. So I'm going to show you the top 4, just to keep it simple for a moment here, and then I'll show you all the rest. So again, these are from executives who we met. And the number one thing they want, surprisingly not at all to all of us, I think, is the ability to build rapport, trust, and comfort with the executive, with the leader. 97% of executives are picking that one. It shouldn't be surprising to any of us. I mean, if you're in this field, you probably have some ability to do this. When I meet coaches at the Starbucks, you know, I'm also kind of gauging this. It's not too measurable necessarily. It could be more of a feeling, perhaps. The vast majority of coaches are always great here, and I think I usually will feel pretty comfortable and trusting. But there are times when I don't, and I need to be aware of that. Now, sometimes it just might be a difference in personality between them and me. It doesn't mean they can't build rapport. But I've had a few occasions where a coach, just something about them is not comforting, or I don't know that I can trust them. I can't figure out what their motivations are. You know, things like this, even personality quirks that might make me less comfortable to put them in front of an executive as well. But I think most people who are in this field would certainly have high marks in this one. Number 2 is just simply your experience as a coach, how good of a coach you are. And you know, this could be all kinds of things. This could include your training. It could include how many years you've been coaching. You know, basically, how great of a coach are you? Are you able to help move people along, help grow them, you know, support them well, but challenge them also? All the things that we all learn about in terms of being a coach. you know, just how good are you is number 2. Number 3 is an interesting one, business experience. So this usually refers to how much corporate past experience do you have, but unfortunately can get overrated as where an executive says that they want someone who's done the job they're in, but has done that job before. So I wrote a blog piece called something like, I want a coach who's done my job before, but on a bigger scale. That's who I want as my coach. And this is a challenge for us because we do have certain coaches with great business experience. We do have former CEOs and CFOs and so forth. However, that's actually the minority of our 1,100 coaches. More coaches come from human resource type backgrounds, leadership development, org development. They might have a degree in org psychology or something similar, IO psychology. And so they may be less likely to have that heavy business experience that executives seem to be asking for. So number 2 and number 3 are kind of I actually think those are the 2 key pillars, if you will. You're trying to find someone who's got some good business experience, but then someone who's actually good as a coach. And there are people who have great business experience, but have no business coaching. And there's people who have fabulous coaching skill, but maybe they don't fully understand the organizational context that people are working in because they've maybe been a therapist or something and never really been in the organizational environment at all. So these are the 2 that we always, probably if you had to pick the 2 that we're looking at the most, it would probably be these 2. My advice, therefore, to you, if for those of you with some business experiences, make sure that's foremost in your bio. Like first paragraph, you know, if you've been a former executive or been a former this or that or whatever, just really talk about your past experience first before getting into other things. Because some coaches start their bio with fluffy statements about I partner with clients and I co-create and I listen to them empathetically and all of that. It's all wonderful, but don't put that in your first paragraph. You know, just let them know about your background and your experience. And then I talked about specializing a little bit ago. That's next, right here, dealing with specific leadership challenges. So when we talk to a company about a coaching need they have, they will tell us this is a head of sales in London, and his or her challenge is they could really use more help in the emotional intelligence department. They tend to lose their cool or whatnot. So we go back into our database, and our coaches have all told us their specialty areas. And so we can go back into the database and run searches for those who have particular specialty in emotional intelligence, who are in London and maybe come from a similar industry if needed. And so that's why it really helps when you have more defined specialty areas that we can find coaches with those specialty areas to bring them to the client. And so those are really the big top 4 of what executives are asking for. Now we'll go ahead and share with you the rest, and then I know we'll have questions. So when I finish this slide, we'll pause because it's always juicy stuff here to be talking about. All right, where am I? Area of specialty. As a coach, match the culture of the company that we're in, being recommended by a colleague, industry experience. The cost is sort of a little bit far down here. Where you're located compared to the leader, whether you have a certification of some kind in our field, if you have a advanced degree in our field, and the last one is whether you're specialized or certified in a certain tool or anything like that. So those are the entire list here. So when I asked you what was top and what was bottom, I think those of you who picked ability to build rapport, that was your top choice. That was the top choice. And near the bottom was this one on coaching certification, which is always a controversial topic when I speak at the ICF, which I will be doing in a month in Prague. For years, I've been pointing out that the certification is really not that important to executives, honestly. But that doesn't mean you don't have one. Some of these things you sort of need to have. They're basics that you probably at this point ought to have, or have worked around, and to some extent. But these other ones just are the ones that executives seem to think are more important for their selections. So with that, this would be a great pause point, because this is always one of the most interesting slides to coaches. So Lawrence, I think we could definitely take some more observations of any kind or questions.
Yeah, we had some observations very consistent with your findings. Rapport coming out top, cost coming down pretty low, connection and certification seemingly low, and also observation in respect of executives' high rapport equaling strong challenges, that they're managing their expectations in terms of that. So any questions at this point from anybody else? If I could have an indication from the floor, please.
Yeah, or if you, in your experience, if you've seen it differently than a list like this, that would also be interesting to hear too.
I don't, just to add my 6 pence worth here, and I think it's interesting that I wasn't surprised cost coming down low. When you're dealing, it depends on what level you're at, but as you get senior in a company, the cost becomes less and less irrelevant and more elastic. And I think it's interesting. A lot of coaches, two things a lot of coaches get really worried about when they first start. And one of them is how much they should charge. But secondly is, have I got the right qualifications? And right here on this slide, what we have as the evidence is that neither really matter. And just, you don't need the qualification to start the work, although it helps. And also don't be shy around your cost. It's a sort of tone poem for authenticity, isn't it? In that, you're worth it, make it valuable.
Yeah, definitely. Great observation. I had a coach see this slide once, and he said, what this is teaching me is that I need to smile more up here, and I should charge more right here.
Yeah.
And it is true. If you underprice yourself, people can see that negatively. They'll think, oh, well, what's wrong with this one, or whatnot. They're pricing it so low, so far below anybody else in the industry.
Yeah, many of us that are involved in chemistry sessions as well, you have half an hour to an hour, depending on what the organization you're working with. And that's sort of like a very challenging sort of time to be able to establish that rapport. It says to me that I should be focusing more time in establishing that rapport, rather than trying to just merely see what the expectations of the clients are from you going forward.
Yeah, chemistry sessions are an interesting one. We've done a number of discussions in our company with our coaches around those. And some coaches decide to really use it as a time to coach. They do a coaching session. Others don't like that because they think they're giving away something for free. But I think the former might be better, because the person really gets a feel for how you work, and you can learn more about what it is that they'd like to accomplish, and see if you can build that rapport. But those are always a bit stressful for all of us. I'm sure all of you have been in those, and you feel like it's this competition. And it's even worse for me, because I'm the CEO of the company. So when they put my bio out, I'm competing against my own coaches. And then people think I'm the best coach of our 1,100 coaches because I'm the CEO, but that's not at all true, because I don't coach nearly as many hours per year as our coaches do in the vast majority of cases. So there's this extra pressure. Oh, I'm going to hire him because the CEO, he must be the best.
I'm sure you are, Brian.
See, the pressure is on.
I think the other third point, I mean, the whole psychology of chemistry sessions fascinates me. And every now and then I'll find myself on the phone to a coach doing a sort of little bit of a chat about how they can improve their, their edge, if you like, when it comes to chemistry sessions. And you know, should I just go in and coach, or should I introduce myself to them? Should we discuss what the program might look like? You know, that ultimately it's up to the coach. You know, you can, and it comes down to rapport, doesn't it? At the end of the day, if you land that rapport, the rest then comes naturally. But your job is to work out what rapport is going to work best for that individual, and sometimes that's not easy.
There's some follow-ups here. Interesting one from Stuart Hayden. Just done a quick update on his profile. Nice timing as he did it yesterday. Do you want? Should we ask Simon if he wants to expand on his? He's written about certification. So Simon, do you want to just ask a little bit more about that?
Hey Lawrence, I thought you were going to come over to me with that one. Thank you. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Yeah. One of the things that I've held on to when I've been coaching and building my practice up, it's very much down to the ethos about who you are, the deep you, and your commitment to developing yourself, the lifelong learning journey that we're all on. And I continually come into struggles with the classification of master coach and stuff like that, which I don't think you ever become a master. I think we're on this lifelong journey. So seeing things like, actually it's down to rapport and how you're getting on with the coachee. It's down to some of your experience and how you can help the coachee to move and transition. It's great to see that at the top rather than the certification stuff.
Yeah, the chemistry is vital. I saw some research, and it comes from therapy. So any of you in the therapy background could quote this better than me, but there a certain high percentage of the success factors of the therapy process is that alliance, the therapeutic alliance between the therapist and the person being in counseling. And I've seen research that has suggested the same thing in coaching. So the chemistry between the coach and the person being coached can account for a fairly high percentage of the positive outcomes that result. And when I've interviewed executives about what they most liked, it was always for the most successful assignments, it was almost always had to do with the connection between the two of them.
Okay. Gareth asks a good point here. Gareth, do you want to come in at that?
Yeah, sorry, I feel like I'm hogging things slightly, but I was just curious about cost, whether that varies people's perception of how important cost is if, say, they're paying on an hourly basis or a monthly retainer. Because my assumption is, say, on an hourly basis, some people tend to be kind of watching the clock and thinking, well, this is costing me money now, I better answer this guy fast.
Yeah, we didn't study it to that about how the cost was being used. So I guess I couldn't say necessarily, you know, I've seen various arrangements from those 2 or 6-month assignment, flat rate, you know, that kind of thing. It's probably that, you know, that cost relating to other possible coaches that they might hire. And if you're too high for what you offer, some people will be turned off by that. But then again, if you're too low, then you have the opposite problem too, that people could be turned off and thinking there must be something wrong because you're so cheap.
Thank you. Edmee, you make a point. Do you want to just come in on that? Edmee, you asked about chemistry sessions and can they be culturally determined?
Well, wasn't
oh, sorry.
a question, it was more a statement.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I believe that the chemistry sessions should be very flexible, and depending on who you're having in front of you. If a Chinese would be very different than a Latino or Dutch. So I think that is also very important to take into consideration.
That's helpful.
That's a great point. Yeah, when someone was saying, what do you do in that chemistry, something coming up in my mind was, well, maybe you let the client help decide that. We could do logistical discussions and I can tell you about me and you tell me about you and I'll tell you how the program works. Or we could just go into a coaching session, confidential, of course. which one of those might be most helpful for you. Maybe that's one way you could handle that. I was asked to go to a big tech company here, and it's one of my first times at that company, so I would love to see if I could be a coach there. And they said, they told me ahead of time a little bit about the leader, but then they said, he is expecting you when you show up to teach him something. And that's all they said. And I don't know what that means. Do I bring like my favorite model? Do I bring a whiteboard? Do I teach him based on what he is ready to learn? In coaching, a lot of times we're doing a lot more question asking than we are just sitting there teaching something. So I'm already trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do with that one before I arrive. All right, well, we have a few more slides, and then we can, of course, take some more questions. I have another couple of observations here. If you want to see more about the difference between executives who you saw here and all the other groups that we surveyed, of course, you could read it in the research in much greater detail, but I just want to point out that the rapport and then the experience and skills of being a coach, those are the number 1 or 2 across the board. So is business experience up high among everybody. And the one about having specialty or specific challenges that you're able to work within. So they're fairly consistent among the groups. In the very bottom, a little bit of consistency too. There's less interest about that you have a certain tool that you're certified in, and less interest about having that advanced degree. A little bit on certification and so forth as well. So a few things are my suggestions for you all. Well, before we do that, sorry. The last thing is your bio, your CV, which I'm sure you work on all the time, and vendors put out and you put out and whatever. A few suggestions based on what we're going to learn here. We asked executives what was most appealing about a bio or CV to them. So I'll send in 3 or 4. And sometimes the executive or the HR person only picks 2 to bring in for interview. And we're trying to figure out, well, why is that? Why didn't you pick these other 2? What was it that was appealing? And so we asked them a few choices. Was it the photo? Was it what they do for speaking, books and publications? Was it their website, educational experience? Those are some choices that we gave them. And probably not a surprise to you that what was most appealing about your CV to executives was plain and simple the business experience that they could see on that bio and the coaching experience that they could see as shown on that bio. So those are the 2 you have to hit really hard and quickly in your CVs. Education is down here, so put that near the bottom. Only 6% of them say they go look you up online. I don't think that's true. I think it's more. And no one seems to think that these other areas are particularly important, but I still think all of this ought to help. Sorry, just to clarify, what I meant is this green line is what organizational practice managers are saying, and the red line is what executives are saying. So I said that wrong incorrectly, but you see relatively similar choices here for these first top 3. Executives are looking you up more often than the organizational practice managers. And then some executives admit a little bit of influence by your photo or your website, tiny about more about the public speaking and so forth you're doing. Photo is an interesting one. That's one of the first things I look for. I think a good professional photo is really going to help. I've literally seen coaches just take a Facebook photo where their arm is around someone and then they just cut off that other person and they're in like a party dress or something like that. The early days that might have been more doable. Now we have so many photos of ourselves. I don't think you need to be doing that. So that can really help. And then, as I mentioned, get that business experience up there first and foremost. So with that, we have about 8 minutes left for additional discussion, comments. Oh, and I have another trivia question, but Here, I'll do that now as long as we're talking together. So your other guess as to what other Starbucks this is in, and it's not in Europe, and it's quite a long time ago because my computer looks very dated now that I look at it there. So let's begin, Lawrence, our discussion, and then if anyone's piping in on our location, we'll recognize them.
We've got somebody that that's asking if we could briefly discuss what we mean by rapport, because this comes to them in their world of mediation. So could I have the person that just can't quite make out who that is?
It's Lynn.
Lynn. Lynn, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm unmuting myself. Yes, I thought we've kind of talked about the importance of rapport, without perhaps defining what that is, kind of bottling what that is, and for example, to what extent that's establishing similarity, establishing understanding, empathy, establishing degrees of challenge, boundaries around that. So I just thought perhaps people might have different views on what rapport is or what good rapport is. There might even be different views between coaches and coachees, executives, as what good rapport looks like. And we perhaps should just open that up, please.
Yeah, that's a great discussion for everyone, not just me, for sure. By the way, controversial, possibly, view I heard in London at our conferences last week. We had David Peterson over, who's the head of coaching at Google and a big writer in our field. And he on the stage said, a good coach should be able to build rapport with nearly everyone. That's a good coach. It doesn't matter. And others of us often believe, well, that's kind of more natural between two people. And sometimes it's there and sometimes it just isn't. But he thinks that any coach should be able to, a great coach should be able to build rapport with nearly anybody as a coach. So up for discussion for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think the challenge is, as I said in my in the text, good rapport can be high challenge, and it isn't natural immediately for you to sit down with a client and go at them, if you like, and it doesn't naturally think, well, hang on, this is a really successful interaction we're having here, until you get to the end of it and they say that's been really beneficial. And so there's an element of risk in it, isn't there, in terms of how you build rapport. Is you've got to be authentic, read the signs, and act totally with your gut, and just hope well, most times you can get it right, but I have one incident where I got that wrong and it spectacularly failed. But otherwise,
I think we all do.
Yeah.
We all do.
Stories for a night down the pub maybe, but yeah, I mean, I think you've got to take the risk in order to ensure that you get, if rapport is that important, the risk must be taken.
I saw a little bit of research from this study actually, where we asked executives whether they felt their coach pushed them too much, didn't push them enough, or was just right. And generally, most of it was just right, with a little bit of leaning towards they could have pushed me more. Now, like Tim, the one time I got spectacularly fired is because I was told I was pushing too hard in one case. So that chickened me out and I got wimpier maybe as a coach for a while there. But I think executives generally have told us they'd probably like to see a little bit more accountability or a little bit more pushing from the coach than we sometimes give.
I quite often say in chemistry sessions about challenge that, like being at the dentist, if it starts to hurt, just raise your hand and we can pull back a little bit.
I like that a lot. Oh, I like that. We're going to have to use that one, especially because my wife's a dentist, so I get a lot of that. Yeah, when I raise my hand, she doesn't stop. Probably because I'm not paying for it, so she needs to get me off the chair quickly.
We've got Karina making a point. Karina, do you want to add to what you've got on the message board?
No, not particularly. Just an observation, just a thought.
And also we have one from Edmi about authenticity being of importance. Do we have any other questions or observations that you want to share?
I really like that one about authenticity. I mean, if you've read one of the classics in our not the coaching field, but the consulting field, is Peter Block's book, Flawless Consulting. Just a classic. And that's really one of the two pillars he talks about, is authenticity, being yourself, being real, and with the client instead of trying to fake it and so forth. And then ultimately you're in a better position in many ways, and if they don't like it, or if they don't like you, then they don't like you. You know, that's just the way it is. But at least you're more and more true to yourself.
Can I ask you, Brian, what do you think about provocation in or coaching with humour in coaching? We had a very interesting speaker last month talking to us about provocation, and it sort of didn't sit as comfortably with some of us and our approach. What's your thoughts in relation to it?
So you said coaching with humour?
Coaching with humour and being sort of provocative with people to sort of tease out some of their points or some of their feelings. There's a few smiles from around the gallery here from experiences that we had, where a couple of us were very hot under the collar, and notes from people afterwards sort of say, you know, well done, Lawrence, for getting through that without sort of like crying or laughing too much.
Well, it's too bad I wasn't there. It sounds intriguing. So without having all that context, I mean, I guess I would keep going back to that rapport building piece. You know, again, in coaching, we're often taught the whole concept of support, but also challenge. These are these two levers that we're constantly working and figuring out the right mixture of them. And so whichever of those seems to be in best service of the client's growth would be the ones to use. And it's hard. Yeah, I use a lot of humor just because I tend to enjoy humor, but you know, it has to have a purpose, of course, as well.
I think it's like anything else. If it suits and fits in well with what you're doing, then it's okay. But otherwise, you have to be very careful.
Absolutely.
Someone's made the observation that I'm still obviously hurting from last month. It happens to be our managing director, so I'm not going to say too much online. It just gives him a source to rib me from time to time. So where was the second Starbucks?
So no one's been able to guess. Oh no, Gareth is on a roll.
Yeah,
KL. That is Kuala Lumpur. Was he the first one to say it? It looks like in here. Wow, Gareth, have you been around the world or what? That's impressive. Very impressive.
No, I'm not that well traveled, so I'm dumbfounded that I got that.
That's amazing. I don't think I've ever had in all my talks someone who hit both of them. You usually get, you know, someone gets one, someone gets the other. So if we were live, you would definitely get a book.
Yeah. We'll have to see what we can do, Gareth, to get that book.
Yeah, exactly.
maybe Tim's got some prizes tucked away in his office desk pedestal somewhere.
Yeah.
I'd have not got anything with Grand Central Birmingham.
If Tim had a few of my books around, I'd tell him to give you one. If you go to ICF Prague, I can give you one there.
All right. The place that I've been to in the world as well.
I have a cupboard full of books behind me. I'm sure one of them's yours, actually, Brian.
Okay. Hey, Tim, I know. Give them mine, and then when I see you, because I'm going to see you in a month, I'll give you another one. So actually, Tim, I have a new book out anyways. So I have a new book with Jonathan Passmore out. I was going to give you one anyway, so I'll send two. I don't know how often you see Mr. Gareth, but
I'll
send it along.
Well, we can sort that out. That's not a problem.
Fine. Okay. There we go.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
Okay. Well, Brian, thank you very much for this afternoon. It's been brilliant. Tim, do you want to say a few words? Or
no, just really good. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. I don't know whether we can show our appreciation in the normal way like this, but thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you all. Thank you for having me. Okay. And stay in touch if you'd like. You know, Tim knows how to reach me, and I put my LinkedIn and Twitter here too. So
just
stay in touch.
Thanks very much, Brian. Thank you very much for this afternoon. It's been very, very interesting. Just before we go, I'd just like to tell people just a bit of a shout out for the next session date is fixed for 1 p.m. on the 10th of October. And we've got Stuart, one of our program directors, going to do the first of 3 sessions on the Embark Index. So also what we would ask, if you want to join in that session, if you have a subject that you would like to share with us or something you would be interested in hearing more about, we're looking for your ideas, really. We don't just want to be generating thoughts that things that we think that might be useful. So we'd like to hear from the community in respect to what they would like to share and what they would like to share with perhaps some more external speakers. And can also encourage any of you that are writing anything or want to share anything on LinkedIn. We'd be really happy to encourage the sharing of information via Unlimited Potential and the coaches here. So just let us know through Tim or Louise and we'll do our very best. Also, as a shout out to our Facebook page, we have a Facebook page. I have no idea how we click onto it because I'm a member of it already. So, but presumably we can do something and we will get these slides out to you as well, and a recording of this will go out. And Brian, we've undertaken to Michael that we'll send you a copy of this so you can keep it for prosperity, and hopefully you'll come back again in the future. So thanks very much, everybody. See you all next time, 1 p.m. on the 10th. Put it in your diaries now. Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.